A wildfire in northwestern Ontario destroyed an entire First Nation community in less than an hour. On the night of July 13th, a fast-moving crown fire, a fire that spreads through the tops of trees rather than along the ground, tore through Collins First Nation, also known as Namaygoosisagagun, approximately 210 kilometers north of Thunder Bay. More than 30 homes burned. The band office, community center, school, cultural cabins, and warehouses were all destroyed. The community, according to its own leadership, was reduced to ashes. No government evacuation order was issued, and no advance warning came from any provincial or federal agency. The roughly 24 people who were present that night saved themselves. Chief Helen Parvola told Canada's National Observer and APTN that residents were evacuated without warning from any ministry or assistance from anyone. She said her community members self-evacuated and bravely carried our elders and vulnerable to safety. They felt the flames on their backs. Their only way out was across the water. Collins First Nation sits on the north shore of Collins Lake, and it is not accessible by road. The only way in or out is by boat or bush plane. On that Monday night, the community loaded into a handful of small boats, 12 and 14-foot vessels, and crossed the lake as their homes burned behind them. Among them was Chance Parvola, the chief's 13-year-old nephew, who drove a tin boat through the smoke. When he saw another vessel overloaded with passengers and at risk of sinking, he turned his boat around and went back. Chief Parvola told CBC that it was a matter of minutes that they would have died. Chance later told CP24, "The flames were jumping and it was so scary. I was in disbelief. I couldn't believe the fire was burning right in Collins." All community members were accounted for, and everyone got out. That same night, just west of Collins, near the town of Armstrong, 3 CN rail freight trains carrying combustible and flammable materials were halted on the tracks when wildfires surrounded the rail line. A crew member filmed from inside the locomotive cab. The video, later shared on social media by Ontario NDP member of Provincial Parliament Sol Mamakwa, shows a wall of flame engulfing the tree line just feet from the tracks. The cab glows orange-red as wind whips smoke past the windows. In the footage, the crew member says, "We are encased in flames now." All CN employees in the area were evacuated overnight, and CN Rail suspended operations near Armstrong. The Teamsters Canada Rail Conference, the union representing those workers, issued a statement. "Make no mistake, this incident should never have happened," it read. "CN should never have sent a train down those lines. The company knows exactly how bad the situation is in that region. That fire has been raging for 5 weeks." Teamsters Canada President Francois Laporte said, "Our members should never have to drive through a wall of flames to move freight. No shipment is worth a human life." CN Rail stated that the safety of employees, the community, and emergency responders remains our top priority. Transport Canada said it was monitoring the situation closely and would not hesitate to impose restrictions if necessary. Collins First Nation sits inside a fire zone that expanded rapidly in early July. A single fire complex near Armstrong grew to more than 350,000 hectares by July 16, according to Canada's National Observer. That is an area larger than the state of Rhode Island. The fire behavior was consistent with crown fire in boreal spruce fir forest, where drought-stressed trees ignite rapidly and fire jumps from canopy to canopy. Prolonged drought and wind created the conditions for this kind of rapid fire spread. As of July 15, Ontario forest fire officials reported 148 active wildland fires in the northwest region alone, with 69 of them not under control. Evacuation orders had been issued for multiple communities, including Armstrong, Whiteson First Nation, Gull Bay First Nation, Lac des Mille Lacs First Nation, Lac La Croix First Nation, Cat Lake First Nation, and McDowell Lake First Nation. Several of these communities are fly-in only, inaccessible by road, and some lost telecommunications entirely. As of that same date, the Ontario government estimated that more than 1,600 First Nations residents had been displaced by wildfires in the 2026 season. 15 Northern Ontario communities had either started or were considering evacuations. The accommodation shortage compounded the crisis. Gull Bay First Nation told its members that evacuees arriving in Thunder Bay could not find places to stay. There are already 100 evacuees from other First Nation communities sleeping in their cars in Thunder Bay because there are simply no vacant hotel rooms, the Community Council said in a statement. It told members to call family and friends who hopefully can provide a night or two. When Thunder Bay reached capacity, some evacuees were transported to Toronto. The destruction of Collins has also put the provincial warning system under scrutiny. Whites and First Nation, which evacuated on the night of July 13th, had spent the day asking Ontario's Ministry of Natural Resources, or MNR, to issue a mandatory evacuation order. According to Darian Baskatawong, senior advisor at Whites and First Nation, the province repeatedly told the community that the smoke was coming from more distant fires and posed no immediate threat. 5 hours after those assurances, provincial officials conceded that we might consider evacuating. Whites and ordered its own evacuation without waiting for the province. One community member did not even have time to grab a pair of socks before leaving. Baskatawong told Canada's National Observer that the province stepped up way too late. He noted that Armstrong itself houses an MNR fire attack base, yet the ministry don't have the resources necessary to protect full towns, even where their bases are. Ontario's MNR acknowledged that officials didn't see the fire that destroyed Collins until it was too late, citing the strain of managing many fires at once. That acknowledgement has fed into a dispute over Ontario's wildfire budget. The province's 2026-27 budget allocates 150 million Canadian dollars for emergency forest firefighting. In the previous fiscal year, 2025-26, the province spent $271 million. Opposition parties, including the NDP, the Liberals, and the Green Party, have pointed to the gap between what was budgeted and what was spent. Premier Doug Ford pushed back, calling the criticism despicable and disgusting and inaccurate. He noted that the base budget rose from $135 million in each of the 2 previous years to $150 million this year, and that firefighting funding in Ontario is based on need, with additional spending approved when conditions require it. The budget allocation is not a firm spending cap. But firefighters have warned that unreliable upfront funding can delay the acquisition and deployment of resources when multiple fires intensify at the same time. Collins First Nation's federal status complicates the response further. The community has 130 registered members who are all status Indians under Canada's Indian Act, but it is not recognized by the federal government as a First Nation. It has been classified as a near band and has been applying for official reserve status since at least 1990. It is recognized by the Anishinaabe Nation but not by Ottawa. That classification determines which government programs and emergency support the community can access. When asked on July 17 whether the federal government would commit funding to rebuild Collins First Nation, Indigenous Services Minister Mandy Gulmasti was non-committal. She said the community exists in a policy gap because it lacks status. It remains unclear whether Collins is eligible for the same rebuilding support available to federally recognized First Nations. Anishinaabe Nation Grand Council Chief Linda D. Bassage said the community is being treated like a jurisdictional pinball between federal and provincial governments. She said there has been no financial or resource support for the community. D. Bassage added that if the community and the Anishinaabe Nation hadn't acted quickly, this would have been a recovery mission. The Anishinaabe Nation has since committed on-the-ground support, accommodation coordination, and government liaison on behalf of Collins. Ontario Regional Chief Abram Benedict stated that jurisdictional disputes and administrative delays have immediate consequences and put lives at risk. He said the priority must be getting people out safely, rather than financial discussions and technicalities. On July 17, chiefs at the Assembly of First Nations annual general meeting in Ottawa passed an emergency resolution calling on the federal government to provide immediate support to Collins First Nation, including commitments to rebuild homes and infrastructure. The resolution also called for an independent review of how the Collins evacuation was handled, stating the community was left to fend for itself. Collins First Nation is not an isolated case. According to Indigenous Services Canada, 44,920 people from 61 on-reserve First Nations were displaced by wildfire in 2025 alone. In 2024, approximately 30,000 Indigenous people were displaced. In 2023, 25,000 people from 79 First Nations were forced from their homes, with more than 11,400 gone for longer than 3 months. According to researcher Amy Cardinal Christensen, cited by Global News, Indigenous communities have accounted for 42% of all wildfire evacuations in Canada, despite making up approximately 5% of the country's population. About 80% of majority Indigenous communities sit in fire-prone boreal regions. As of July 17th, the situation across northern Ontario remains active. Ontario has formally requested federal assistance and the possible deployment of the Canadian Armed Forces. Defence Minister David McGuinty confirmed on July 17 that the military is on standby. The fire complex near Armstrong continues to burn. The communities that evacuated have not returned. Collins First Nation, which has been seeking federal recognition for more than 3 decades, has lost every structure it had. Its members left with the clothes on their backs and a handful of boats. And as of now, no level of government has committed to rebuilding. Subscribe for more informative reports.